Okay, so we're now just over 24 hours away from the release of the Boys in Blue DLC, and while I was planning on making a video discussing the potential narrative of the upcoming heist, I think there's something a little bit more important to talk about. And of course, that's whether or not you should buy the DLC, which itself boils down to whether or not Payday 3 is heading in the right direction. We've spent the last few days here on the channel diving into absolutely everything that we can expect to be added within the next update, and it honestly seems fantastic. I mean, they've added physics to ammo boxes, which is just going to change the way the game works at a fundamental level, and I definitely didn't just make a mistake there. So, sorry about that one. I don't know, something just seems so funny to me about the idea that I had absolutely no idea that physics already existed for the ammo boxes in the game, and then I'm overhyping it as some brand new feature when it's been there since launch. I genuinely didn't know. It's kind of spiraled into a bit of a meme, and perhaps we're going to have to find a way to commemorate that, maybe alongside wide C-stacks. All jokes aside, it's no secret that I'm very excited for the release of the Boys in Blue DLC, but at the end of the day, the last 9 months of Payday 3's lifecycle haven't really given us all that much to put our faith in. To avoid another situation like Payday 3's launch, I thought it was worth explaining why I'm willing to take Starbreeze's word that Boys in Blue is more likely to be the start of the revival that Payday 3 so desperately needs, rather than another short-lived spike in those player charts. But first, of course, would I suggest that you buy Payday 3's DLC 2, the Boys in Blue DLC. The way I see it, there are 5 levels of involvement that you may have with Payday 3, and each of those will change whether or not I'd suggest that you consider buying the DLC. But at the end of the day, it's not for me, or anybody else for that matter, to tell you whether you should or shouldn't buy the DLC. The onus is on you and you alone to decide whether or not you think it's worth it. So with that out of the way, let's look at 5 of the possible scenarios that you could find yourself in, and what I think that I would do if I was in that position myself. To start off with, the most straightforward situation is either you own the silver or gold editions of the game. For all intents and purposes, you already own the DLC and can play it when the update goes live on the 27th. In effort of complete transparency, that's where I find myself. I own the gold edition of the game, so I don't need to do anything to get access to the Boys in Blue DLC besides download and install the update and DLC pack. But now let's talk about if you own the base version of Payday 3 and bought the Syntax Error DLC separately around when it came out. Then I personally probably would buy DLC 2 if I was willing to spend the high price for DLC 1, especially given the state of the game back when DLC 1 came out. Then the likelihood is that I would be okay with buying a DLC at a reduced price, especially considering Payday 3's current state. It's in a much better position than it was back in December. Next up, if you own the base version of Payday 3 but haven't bought the Syntax Error DLC, honestly, I probably wouldn't buy DLC 2 in that case. What I'd choose to do would be find somebody who has purchased the DLC, get them to host a lobby, and try it out for myself, because remember, as long as the host of the party owns the DLC, anybody can play the heist, and if you've not bought the Syntax Error DLC by now, then you clearly don't mind being a little late to the party, and in that case, I may even suggest holding off until DLC 3 and 4 are out, seeing where the game is by then, and maybe buying the Gold Pass, which will give you access to all 4 Year 1 DLCs. While the price of the Gold Pass hasn't been revealed just yet, it only makes sense for it to be cheaper than the sum of its parts, and with the Steam Summer Sales just around the corner, who knows how long it will be until that Gold Pass is discounted. Moving on to those of you who may own the game through Xbox Gamepass and haven't bought any DLCs yet, I'd say the same thing applies here, or in fact even more so. If you've managed to avoid paying for Payday 3 so far, I'd certainly wait until we know whether the hype built up around DLC 2 is going to stay, or just be a flash in the pan. Again, I'd highly suggest trying to get into some lobbies that are hosting the new heist, but don't necessarily buy it yourself just yet. At the end of the day, I find it highly unlikely that if the Gold Pass is discounted on Steam, that it won't also be discounted on console. So if I owned Payday 3 on Game Pass, I'd be keeping a close eye on the price of that Gold Edition, at least over the next few weeks. Before we talk about the final level of Payday 3 involvement that you may have, it's worth mentioning that regardless of whether or not you intend to buy this or any future DLC, if you haven't played Payday 3 in a while, I definitely recommend giving it another chance, especially over this weekend when we can almost guarantee player counts will be up. Depending on when you last played, Payday 3 is in a drastically better state, even just since its most recent update that saw the implementation of the brand new overhauled progression system that makes grinding through those levels significantly less tedious than it was beforehand. And speaking of giving Payday 3 another chance, that brings us nicely onto the final level of involvement that you may have with Payday 3, and that's no involvement at all. You may not own the game, and if you don't own the game but are still keeping an eye on it, waiting for it to improve and so on, while right now I don't feel I can honestly say that I recommend it. As much as I am really enjoying my time with Payday 3 and am playing it almost constantly, I don't know if I'm in the position right now where I can turn to people and say, hey, part with your money, go buy this game, it's much better than it was a year ago from now. I still think we're a little bit away from that, but I am confidently optimistic that by the end of summer, I'm gonna be able to say that Payday 3 is worth it. And because I think that so much is going to be coming to the game over the next few months, I honestly don't know whether or not I'd buy DLC 2 and of course the rest of Payday 3 as a whole right now if I didn't own it. I can imagine that I'd be split between wanting to wait until all of the content makes its way to the game over the next few months, but by the same token, I'd probably want to be a part of the player base that gets to go on the ride that will be the summer of Payday 3. I really do believe we're in for a big 2 months, and obviously you can pick up the game after that, and most probably will, but I think for those of us that are here now, it's gonna be a fun ride. I really do. And of course, at the start of this video, I said that I'd explain why I'm allowing myself to trust Starbreeze's promises over the next few months, and just before we get into that, I wanted to take a quick moment to ask that if you are enjoying this video, that you consider clicking that subscribe button. Just over a month ago, I set the goal of trying to reach 500 subscribers by the time this DLC released. We absolutely smashed that out of the park, so then we aimed for 1,000, which we also completely obliterated. We're now so very close to 1,500, which is 3 times where I had hoped that we'd be by now, and I just want to say that I really mean it when I say each and every subscriber counts. I've said that I've been cooking some really exciting stuff for the future of this channel, and with DLC 2 right around the corner, so is everything that I've been working on. So if you aren't subscribed yet, now may be the perfect time to do so. Anyway, as for why I'm so optimistic about Starbreeze's ability to deliver on the next few months of content, while we know that Payday 3 obviously got off to an exceptionally lackluster start, since then, Starbreeze have not only been admirably transparent about the future updates, they've also stuck to their update cadence outlined by Operation Medic Bag all the way back in February, I think it was, when they announced the 4 to 6 week update cadence, and they have been keeping to that ever since. Each update has added either a small amount of content or a major change/addition to the game, and I believe that the content was there to tide the player base over from update to update and keep the conversation going, but the changes, well, I believe their goal was to lay the foundation for this massive summer of content, and I don't believe for a second that Starbreeze would have announced what they have or hyped up the summer of Payday 3 as much as they did if they weren't confident of their ability to deliver this time. They know just as well as we do, if the next few months of Payday 3 even slightly mirror launch, that could be the end for Payday 3. Of course, I don't have a crystal ball and can't tell you whether these next few months can revive the community, but I'm hopeful. The road to a better Payday 3 was always going to be a marathon and not a sprint, and as I've said many a time in the past, I'll be here every step of the way. If you're looking for a refresher on everything that we're going to be seeing added to the game tomorrow in Update 8, click the video on screen now and I'll see you in the next video.